plans are sort of to talk a little bit about how I put it together and other things about the book, and read some passages in talking about it. Focus in on the Chipko Movement work a little bit, and then once I've gone through most of that, open it up for questions and comments. Although if you're wondering something along the way, you're welcome to ask. So let me see here. Okay. Greetings, saludos, namaskar. These greetings are reaching locally, regionally, and globally, I hope. And I am grateful to Greg, Harmon, and Deceleration for the live stream bringing us together. I dedicate this presentation to all peoples who make poetics in the face of eco-calamities, who make the work that carries us through and preserves our eco-humanity. In particular, to the people of Gaza, and today, our hearts are with Rafah. I give my gratitude, my appreciation, and mil gracias to Ecocentro, and particularly to Jason Rodriguez, who took me up on the offer to introduce my book to the world from this beautiful spot. And for those of you who do not know, well, you probably all do, but maybe on Facebook, we are sitting amidst ancient springs here that feed our Yanaguana, and by a long ridge running east to west that serves as the confluence of hill country and coastal plains. I deeply appreciate all the writers, publication staff who recognized its merit and helped make this book a reality. Check out their X website for the announcement of this event. And as of this week, they've added the introduction and afterward to the public view on the book's website. And I think most of you have seen that, and it's also up here. And I have some papers with that website. I recognize Mary Agnes Rodriguez, whom I'm thinking, she was hoping to come, and I'm thinking we need to keep an eye out because she's coming in on the van, who made the painting that makes the cover of the book. Environmental Justice Poetics, Cultural Representations of Environmental Racism from Chicanas and Women in India would not be what it is without its cover. And while I hope you all read the book, or at least some of it, I'm happy to have you judge this book by its cover first. And I think if you haven't seen it, it is here, and there in the back as well. We are grateful for the two murals that provided the images for Mary Agnes' painting. One is local from our borderland, from Del Rio, a short drive away, and just up from Dos Aguilas, or Eagle Pass, where our river valley is now in the Texas administration's shadow of death. And the other mural is from Kalahandi district, a tribal community in Odisha in eastern India. The stories behind the murals, the photographers, including my dad, who did the picture of the Indian mural and is hopefully watching, and my students in a fantastic but ill-fated Women and Gender Studies course at UTSA all played a part. There was a couple of students that did a report and turned in the mural picture, and I had heard about it, and I saw it later too, but they brought my attention to the border mural, and we'll look at that a little later, the original photo. For further stories and thank yous, please read the acknowledgments on the website. Some people tell me they don't read acknowledgments, but mine are good. But I'm gonna start off here by reading the last two lines of the reading, by reading the last paragraph actually of the acknowledgments. My preface makes clear the importance of the North Star orientation of both the more than human natural world and the justice, peace, nonviolent resistencia, and satyagraha orientations from my parents, Dwight and Levon, our small extended family, and interconnecting spheres of kin, colleges, and communities. I wish to acknowledge their contributions to my part in this circle and its steady source of strength, a foundation for my bookmaking. I take responsibility for the errors herein and any pronunciation errors I have today, because I'm sure I will, as well as the complicity of my study in an unjust and ecologically and culturally disastrous world headed into climate cacophony. Nevertheless, this book is the result of a great many world kin who have shared their visions, art, struggle, scholarship, and hope. My appreciation and my pledge to not give up on hope and to move our work forward. Okay. Oops. Then I would like to go to the Environmental Justice Booksite. Jason, thanks. Because I want to sort of give you a sense of how this works. Yeah, this is the about the book, and then if you can go look at that later, but hit contents right there, yeah. And then hit table of contents. The third one down.
There we go. It's going to download.
Oh, okay. Is that how it works? I just wanted to show you the table of contents because the book has two parts. The first part is mostly focused on, and this is a very interdisciplinary book, and the first part is focused on organizations and social movement theory and work, and the two are intertwined. I mean, it's not like they're in here in two parts. The second part is a literary that looks at novels and other literature, well, also things like testimonial and quite several different genres that are in line with environmental justice as well. And so you can see a sense in the table of contents of what is in the book. And part of what I wanted to do today, since this book is very pricey, and right now we're working on the book we're working on the public library to get the book, and then I think we could all see it. Because I actually had a student who had let us know that one of the books, it was coming to Foya's book, for some reason isn't coming in. This is quote and data. Anyway, he had found it he's in Colorado, and he had found it in the San Antonio Library online and was letting other students know, if you haven't gotten your copy, you can see it there. So I'm thinking that San Antonio has a good distribution of books that people can come to publicly once it gets there. But for now, this site now has the introduction, the preface, and the afterword, as well as some things like this. And so a lot of that is stuff that you can read and get a sense of what's going on in the book. And so I'm really pleased. I just found out yesterday that they had added the introduction and the afterword. And the book will be in paperback in a couple years, unfortunately, but and will be much more affordable. But yeah, so I just wanted to give a sense of the layout of the book, and we're gonna sort of work our way through it and then focus in on Chipko. I am sorry, I had a few things that I decided to take out since they are in the introduction, and you can read those on your own later. But this is one piece from the introduction that I wanted to read, and it's about women and their leadership roles. Women of color have often taken leadership roles in social environmentalism. Anyway, social environmentalism is a term that I don't know how widespread it is, but I heard it first in Austin when I was interviewing Gilberto, what's his last name? Who was, here it is, Gilberto Rivera. And he used that term. He says to be a social environmentalist is to be a person who is concerned about humanity and also about all living things in our world. And while I'm here at the epigraphs to the introduction, I'll read one also from Vandana Shiva. You can't really separate issues of ecology from feminism or from human rights or from development or from issues of ethnic and cultural diversity. So anyway, women of color have often taken leadership roles in social environmentalism. To consider social identity dynamics in this discourse from their standpoints, I focus primarily on their work. As mentioned in the preface, women in general suffer different and often more severe biological and sociological effects from environmental toxins than men. For instance, in the Himalayan foothills, women are affected more adversely by deforestation because their daily work depends on a forest-based subsistence economy that is being destroyed, while men are more likely to benefit, at least in the short term, from the intruding cash economy. Thus, women are discriminated against structurally. When such structural discrimination impacts daily family life, women have often emerged into the public sphere, initiating grassroots politics and bringing with them a poesis based in cultural tradition and individual creativity. In some cases, earlier struggles against colonization set a precedence for women's activism that was rekindled in the contemporary environmental justice movement. The Chipko Andolan's history with Gandhian Satyagraha workers in the Himalayan foothills is an example of this. Okay. And just to, I've talked about poetics a lot, and just to sort of give a little bit of idea of what the more details on that. It's broader than just poetry, for sure, and so it's a term that comes more from cultural studies. This is really an interdisciplinary study, and the poetics comes, cultural poetics, poesis is a broad span of work, and so it erases that high culture kind of thing, because it's anything that's art expression that's done in the name of that communication. And let's see. So what my study is focusing on work that has been generated, has generated the foundational concepts of environmental justice, and I've organized my study around that. Its diverse iconography addresses environmental justice issues that are often ignored by mainstream. Such concerns include the destruction of forests that provide villages sustenance, the uneven distribution of toxic waste dumps, dangerous pesticide use by agricultural growers, dam projects that displace communities and irrevocably destroy the land, livelihoods and sense of place, industrial accidents and resulting holocausts, and the environmentally related health concerns of women in industrial high-tech workplace, in maquiladoras, farm work labor, and indentured servitude. Whether rural or urban, the setting is most often in economically disenfranchised communities, in places such as borderlands or neighborhoods within metropolitan areas to which rural women have been displaced. So contemporary cultural narratives that expose environmental racism and demand justice have been presented in a variety of genres, including novels, creative nonfiction, short stories, poetry, songs, manifestos, testimonials, theory, philosophy, film, video, drama, performance art, street theater, radio programs, poster art, community flyers, graphic art, political cartoons, sculpture, installations, murals, and other public art. And that's, well, let's see, then also in things like that have been they've been promoted, a lot of the groups that work on this have promoted environmental justice in press conferences, demonstrations and rallies, padyatras, pilgrimages, marches for protest or protection, radio programs, toxic tours, galleries, lectures, and cultural celebrations. And I'm sure most of you in this room have been participating in much of this. Activists, artists, and academics have worked side by side, often in different but mutually supportive roles, to confront neighborhood and international environmental issues impacting human communities. So that's just a little bit of general overlay. I wanted to say, okay, I'm on the page I want to be on, that this book, I mentioned it was written, or most of you know, it was written 20-some years ago. It was written over a number of years, but I started the work in graduate school. I ended up, for my dissertation, working just on the literary part, and then worked further for the next few years, including the time that I came here and taught at Incarnate Word for a couple of years with Sally. And so it would have been, it was almost published a couple times, or it was heading toward publication a couple times. And things happened. But it also would have been published earlier, I'm pretty sure, if I hadn't insisted on keeping both, yay, some more folks, the women in, isn't he coming in? Is your son coming?
He's just telling his daddy to go.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Come in and, join us.
Yes.
We're still at the beginning here. If I had been willing to just write on Chicanas, I had a couple publishers that were wanting to take the book. One, it was because they had a national, their focus was only stuff within the nation, and it was sort of legit. Some others, it was like, I don't know. Anyway, but I wouldn't do that. And so that's why I've got what I do now, which I think I'm still happier about. So I just another little paragraph here looking at India and Greater Mexico, which is how I call the communities here that I'm talking about. Common to both India and Greater Mexico is the displacement. And I've mentioned several other things, but I'm going to read this little section. This displacement of agricultural workers due to environmental ruin, and now also to climate issues, into urban communities already under the siege of poverty. Often these areas are also industrial toxic dumping zones for the metropolises. In both India and Greater Mexico, a complex set of social disenfranchisement and displacement issues has affected both the rural and often immigrant poor, and indigenous peoples. These issues establish continuities and discontinuities with older colonial histories of relations between other, often immigrant groups, and indigenous peoples whose interests were disregarded in the civic structures imposed by the new arrivals. While Spain's colonization initially dominated indigenous peoples in what would become future sites of Chicano homelands, U.S. people of Mexican descent have developed a community and cultural identity that proactively responds to the later appropriation of Mexican land by Anglo-American domination and the accompanying settler colonialism. Likewise, the British dominated in colonizing India beginning in the 19th century, though there were others, but previous immigrants had, over the course of India's history, encroached upon the land and cultures of the indigenous people there, who today are among the most marginalized groups in the country. Indian, indigenous, or tribal history has clear parallels with the experience also of Native American peoples, and to the extent they identify with their indigenous ancestries and connections with Chicanos and Chicanas in the U.S. Mahashweta Devi discusses these parallels, telling American readers, "See what has been done to Native Americans and you will understand what has been done to Indian tribals." Okay. So, the next little section I'm gonna do, let's see, focusing on that term that's in my title, environmental racism. Environmental racism, the antithesis of environmental justice, foregrounds environmentally related discrimination based on race, but not divorced from class and gender and other such things. The term environmental racism was coined in 1982 during demonstrations against a PCB landfill slotted for Warren County, North Carolina, a rural, economically disenfranchised, predominantly African American county. And Benjamin Chavez explains that for the more than 500 protesters who were arrested, the behavior of the county officials was seen as an extension of institutional racism many of them had experienced in the past. That connection, there's a connection to the civil rights movement for the environmental justice here. There's a connection to the Satyagraha and the Gandhian movement for a lot of the for some of the movements in India, particularly the Chipko movement. And so they're interesting antecedents. Okay, let me see here. I want to read, I think one of the important things, as I sort of mentioned in my earlier statements right now, is thinking about immigrants and what's going on here now for that group of people. And I have a section in the third chapter, I guess, that is on immigration and environmental racism. And let's see. This was written, it's interesting to think back because a lot of you in here will remember the Proposition 187, and that was happening about the time that that I was working on some of this. And I'm just going to read this because it's an interesting sort of flash to the past, and maybe there's some parallels here for the present. But Elizabeth Martinez, Betita, many of you know, has observed, young youth play a strong role in this resistance to hatred. They're talking about 187 in California that was denying a lot of rights to immigrants. And it was a proposition that a lot of it didn't go into effect because there were lawsuits, but it still had a lot of fear for people and had a lot of detrimental things. Both the proposition and the demonstrations of resistance to it, which were really wonderful marches at that time, operated on a figurative level. And so she pointed out the youth that had the importance here, and I think in terms of the climate action and many other things, youth are important now too, and it's of course a different set of people. Another thing I wanted to take from this is a little quote from an article entitled "Environmental Justice Needs No Green Card." And of course, there, Kathy Takatorquin explains the history of the phenomenon of blaming environmental problems on immigration and immigrants. The immigration population issue began to percolate some years ago when ads in California newspapers blamed immigrants for pollution, overcrowding, traffic congestion, and even the state's drought. More recently, groups such as Californians for Population Stabilization initiated direct mail campaigns urging stricter controls on immigration to protect the environment. And in some ways, these things seem like small potatoes to what's happening now here, but it's interesting to look back to that. The double meaning of green in her title puts forth a figurative relationship of immigration and eco-justice. Too often, the green card that allows one to pass as a legal resident in the United States does not allow one to pass into a green, clean environmental zone. Rather, Latinos and Latinas and recent immigrants, as well as families whose presence in the region preceded the moving of the border, are likely to have their neighborhoods and job sites turned into toxic dumping grounds. I just wanted to call your attention to that. There's a lot more in those relationships. There's a woman that I met in Oregon when I was on a fellowship there, Guadalupe Quinn, and she, a couple of things that she talked about, she said, well, one of our big issues in the organization that she was working with was the environmental, this was in Eugene, Oregon, the environmental speakers that would come and talk and not see the connections to, the positive connections to immigrants. But also there had been raids and things like that going on there. And there were another thing that when I talked to some of the social service agencies and stuff that served immigrants, and I asked about environmental issues, they talked about several people who had come as workers from, I think it was Nayarit, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right there. Yeah, and they had a similar kind of cancer, I can't remember now, but anyway, that was coming, and then there's, I don't remember but I looked into it, and there was industry or whatnot there were connections there that made sense, but it was just an observation. Another observation, one of the ways that I first saw things or learned about the use of DDT, which before glyphosate, was, or Roundup was maybe the biggest thing, but that was when I was really small. When we went to India in 1970, it had already been pretty much not being used here. But then when I taught at Incarnate Word, and we were doing a composition class with an umbrella of environmental justice, and so students were writing about that. And one student wrote about how her father, who was a farmer and only read Spanish, had been sold DDT for generations in the local hardware store. And then his kids sort of said, hey, wait a minute, what is this? And they started talking about it, and it turned out that, and I mean, there's no proof of this, but I guess, but they, in her generation of her cousins and stuff, they all had, it wasn't just minor, deformities or something in their fingers or whatever, and they started wondering if that's what it came from. So there's stuff that creeps up all the place. I'm gonna go ahead and start. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna read one poem from the Narmada dam resistance work, and I'm not really going to talk about that whole thing a lot, but one little start. Early in 1991, Metha Patkar, who was one of the leaders, and 6 other activists, including 2 tribal women, began a fast to death, which was called off after 22 days. The statement linked the environmental abuse with social disenfranchisement, and they were trying to stop dams on some of the rivers, major rivers there that were causing a lot of issues. Behind our exploitation of nature often lies our exploitation of each other. By taking away traditional rights of millions of tribal and small and marginal farmers from subsistence use of natural resources, the benefits are derived at the cost of enormous suffering to affected population and massive overuse and degradation of surrounding resources. And then another poem that was a lot of these poems also turned into songs. This is, as I build this dam, I bury my life. The dawn breaks, there is no flour in the grinding stone. I collect yesterday's husk for today's meal. The sun rises and my spirit sinks. Hiding my baby under a basket and hiding my tears, I go to build the dam. The dam is ready. It feeds their sugarcane fields, making the crop lush and juicy. But I walk miles through forests in search of a drop of drinking water. I water vegetation with the drops of my sweat as dry leaves fall and fill my parched yard. So there's lots in these, but that I talk about a little bit, but I think everyone here is probably catching as much or more than I do. So I'm going to turn over now to the Chipko movement. The name Chipko comes from North Indian word meaning to embrace. During demonstrations to stave off lumbering, local participants hugged the trees and tied sacred threads around them as protection. The current Chipko movement, which began in the Garhwal region of Uttar Pradesh, arose in a nation and a region with a long and rich heritage of activism for land and forest protection and women's rights. It has evolved into a coalition of villages working on a wide span of forestry issues, including cooperative replanting and tree nurturance, that has forestalled major corporate development in the area. Chipko is only one example of the sophistication of women's activism in India that has not been given adequate attention in the Western Academy. even among feminists and, quote, third world studies scholars. And my examination of the ideologies and poetics of environmental politics in this section samples only a small segment of these important Indian women's and their allies' work. So, I mentioned the folks that the precursors to Chipko being a lot of the Gandhian workers, and this is from a woman that sort of was from had that background, and then was one of the first to notice some of the issues that were happening along with the deforestation. And she writes, in this mirror bin, she writes, "Within a year or two, I witnessed a shocking flood. As the swirling waters increased, there came first bushes and boughs and great logs of wood. Then, in their turmoil of more and more water, came whole trees, cattle of all sizes, and from the time to time a human being clinging to the remnants of their hut. The sight of these disastrous floods led me each summer to investigate the area to the north from whence they came. Merciless deforestation, as well as cultivation of profitable pines in place of broadleaf trees, was clearly the cause. This, in turn, led me to hand over the work that she was doing for government staff and to undertake a community project in the valley. Here I built a little center, the Gopal Ashram, and concentrated on the forest problem." So that was sort of some of the beginnings. And I talk about some instances, and this happens in the Mothers of East LA. There are several parallels that I actually go into here with the Mothers of East LA, and that where they're initially led by usually a man, someone that has extra information and distributes that, and I'm not saying it as well as it's written, but anyway, and gets people excited on doing this work. And so it becomes, then the women take over, but it is a way that ultimately the men are contributing to more gender equity, I think, because they are informing people of what is going on, and that helps, from their own privilege, I guess, a privileged knowledge. So, so there's a lot of folks that are involved in the Chipko that some of these poets are also men, and many of them, but then the women are the ones that take over and make chants and songs and make it into a movement. And also then there were, the women were confronting the contractors, who were all men, of course. And so here's one quote, and I'll read some more. But though I like this one because it, like several others, talks about the connection of the forests and the trees and the food that they collected, and also the water. There's many more about the water as well, but this one, when the women of Rainey protected their forests, they told the contractors' men, this forest is our mother's home. When we have food scarcity, we come here to collect fruits for our children. We collect herbs and ferns and mushrooms. Do not cut this forest, otherwise we will embrace the trees and protect them with our lives. Let's see. Oh, and then the women, in addition to their protests, they and their protection, and they met in one of these, they met with the city council, and then they actually got the contractors to go away, or the government intervened, I think. The women decided that if the trees were to be felled, they would Chipko, and they asked for this guy's help. And the men of the city council told the women to go back to the kitchen and the fields, and threatened the man's life if he came back to the village. On the 9th of February, 1980, activists held a Chipko and prevented the tree cutting. 9 days later, the government ordered felling in the area to stop, and within a month, the cutting was stopped. However, the women leaders were defamed and asked not to attend further meetings. This was a successful protest, and was a turning point for the movement. Following this, local women, intent on saving their environmental lifeways in the Himalayan foothills, repeatedly stood against development ideology-prone men as the movement progressed. The women continued fighting to save forests even when the perpetrators of destruction were then local men interested in obtaining commercial gain from the market economy by cashing in the forests. And they also organized, had cooperatives organized to pay watch women who would stand guard over the forest and stay out there all night. And then the other thing that happened with Chipko is that all these tactics and performative tactics spread and have been being used in other related industries, and also spread across the nation in different ways. And Jason, if you want to bring up the the feminist visual poetics, this website, this is from the Women Eco Artists Dialogue, and it's an article I wrote a few years ago. Just scroll up. Okay, this is half of the Del Rio, Texas, a dump, and I didn't. This half isn't on the cover, but I just wanted to limit it down. But this is against the Stafford dump that, and it's right across the Rio Grande Bravo from Ciudad Cunha in Coahuila, and this photo was from 1999. And scroll on down, and I think that's another one. Okay, this is the half of it that, these are the ones that, I asked Mary Agnes to put into the painting that she did for the cover. And this actually says, say no to, it says to toxic waste dumps, and then I was thinking it named the, so it's like the cover. And then if you scroll on down, and these are some other places. That's Oregon, which I mentioned, or several places. And that one's San Antonio. And the white herons, white egrets, that's before we had our issues that go on up. This is the one to maybe leave it on there for a little while. This is Chipko Movement mural, and this is in the Kalahandi district of Odisha, which used to be called Orissa, India. This is where my family has my parents worked there in the 1950s in an AFSC, American Friends Service Committee village project shortly after the independence, and then we went back. My dad was teaching at a university there when he had a sabbatical, and I was 11 and 12, and so we have a lot of connections and still have friends, maybe some listening, who are there or who are from there, from Orissa, and but my dad went back in the 90s to do a study of, he's a biologist and ecologist, and he had started a study of frogs, and he went back to look and see what was going on 30 years later, and I was there for some time. And so at this time, he had gone with, I guess just, I don't think it was related to his study, but it was, you know, some friends or something wanted to show them where they was working. So this is more of an area where it's largely indigenous people, and also very rural, and in terms of economically poorer people. And so we don't know a whole lot more. I mean, he had put some notes about it, but you know, didn't know a whole lot of background, like whether there was actually people doing this kind of Chipko there, or if it was just, it was on the development, what's it called? The Development Agency for Poors and Tribal Awakening artists that did it. So, and that's Oria in the bottom. It's a script I can sort of kind of make out a few words. And the bicycles, I like the bicycles in the foreground. Probably how people get around there, or did anyway then. Yeah, so how are we doing on time?
It's 7:17.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna. Okay, so another one of the little of the songs, the short poems, goes like this. And again, this is a connection. The connections between the trees and the forest, and what do the forests bear? Soil, water, and pure air. Soil, water, and pure air. Sustain the earth and all she bears. You can see how that can become a great chant or song. Or now I'm going to skip over to, there's two Chipko chapters here. One is looking at the movement in the first part, and the next is looking even more focused on the poetics, and in particular it also talks about a novel called Yatra, or the Foot March, that was written about, that took place within the Chipko movement. Just about to get there. Wait a minute. Okay. Oh, another thing that I think that they were protesting, and that they was the planting of eucalyptus trees, which took up a lot of the water and was there just for, you know, cash economy. So Sunderlal Bahaguna, who was one of the, he and his wife were both involved a lot, but he, I think, he was trying to get this word out, and he says it was an early version of Chipko poetry on the run, when he tells about the related struggle against the planting of commercial eucalyptus, which was taking over more diversified plant communities. In this instance, invasive plantings were pulled. We walked over the hills using songs to take the message to the people. There is a song which says, if you see a eucalyptus tree, pull it out, because it spoils the others. It takes too much water and is a friend of the capitalist. I walked 2,500 kilometers at that time. Another person who did a lot of walking to villages and such, and I'm not looking at her work very much today, but it's a really wonderful part of the book is Mahashweta Devi, and she wrote a lot of stories about the villages of Bihar and West Bengal or Bangla, which is just, that's also on the East Coast, which is where Orissa is. It's just, they're above Orissa. But she would, and very rural and very poor, and she would walk from village to village and just to learn about what was going on. And her works are translated because her poetry or her, not really poetry, but her drama and novels and fiction and stuff she wrote in Bengali or Bangla, and her political statements and essays and stuff in newspapers she would write in English. It's sort of interesting. Okay, so just because it's here, I'm going to take a little break. I'm probably going to read one or two more Chipko things, but because yesterday was Valentine's Day, I had to read. I wanted to read a couple little things from a couple of the other novels, and this one is from Under the Feet of Jesus. Some of you may be familiar with by Helena Maria Bermontes. Anybody read it? Anyway, this is I like the scene. This is about I'll just give the introduction I have here. In Under the Feet of Jesus, the author shows how sentiment and collective strength develops in Estella, a young Chicana farm worker who battles poverty in league with her family and gives support to her young novio as he battles a life-threatening illness brought on by pesticide poisoning. Alejo, Estella's prospective novio developing love interest, is sprayed by a pesticide duster plane while in a tree picking peaches for himself. During the horrendous experience, he fleetingly thinks of the spraying as punishment for stealing. Such internalized acquiescence stands in comparison to the consciousness raising of the United Farm Workers who distribute white leaflets with black eagles on them. That's a quote from the book. That Estella tucks away to later read because her eyes hurt too much. But it's through characters like Estella and Alejo, who finally will not be defeated, that the farm workers' collective task is carried out. He doesn't recover, but becomes weaker, and that's another whole part of it. But what I wanted to read is just this little section where they're sort of getting to know each other, and they're taking a break from their work, and they're laying under a truck. Alejo defies the stereotype of uneducated, disenfranchised farm worker. He has an interest in geology and the will to go to college after a few summers of farm labor. And he's sort of on his own there, and he wants to make further education financially feasible, and so he's doing this work, and is an immigrant, I believe. I don't know where his family is. Furthermore, the romance between Alejo and Estella is predicated on an intellectual as well as an emotional, physical connection. In a tender scene before he is too weak to work, he and Estella have found refuge from the searing sun and hard field labor work by laying in the shade of one of the trucks. A leaking oil tank above them leads Alejo to tell Estella about tar pits, the source of fossil fuels. The bones lay in the seabed for millions of years. That's how it was. Makes sense, don't it? Bones becoming tar, oil. Estella felt Alejo's hand take hers, and she could feel the wet of sweat rolling down the side of her breast. So I just put that in there. Another. I mentioned a testimonial text that I and I should say with the farm workers that actually Rebecca is in her a couple places. And I don't have them marked, but or I would read them. In fact, one time was when you came to, when I was at UT Austin, and you and Cesar Chavez came, and I think you talked, and yeah, I talk about that day. This is another farm worker, both farm worker and advocate for farm workers, or activist, Maria Elena Lucas, who wrote a testimonial text. So like the Roberta Minshew and some of those, it was told to another woman, although she has also done artwork and her own writing, but a lot of the text is narrated. And then, I think they taped it, and then Fran Lieber-Bus was the woman that put it together. And it's called Forged Under the Sun. And Forjada, I'm not going to try the Spanish right now. I don't have it in front of me. But in this, she's talking about her grandmother, and this is a little bit about dandelions and what her grandmother said about this, and I don't know, it was interesting to me. My grandmother would tell me we were farm worker flowers, and she would call me my dandelion, because she'd say we were like dandelions, that the wind would blow us into the drifting winds, and we'd go all different directions and go land somewhere, only to start all over again. And that was from her diary. There are diary things in there too. While this might read as an endearing conversation between an older woman and a young girl, the question is, does it read as a symbol of resistance or transformation? It suggests a lack of autonomy in a way, and the ability to adapt to rather than actively resist the oppression. Dandelions are flowers, but they are most often seen as weeds, yet they also serve as food, sustenance, and persistence. In some cultures, their role as food prevails. And I have a footnote here because I had posted a picture of dandelions that are there on the bus stop by my house on Facebook, I think, and my friends Nadine and Iman it was Nadine that wrote back to me and talked about her memories of them in the village in Lebanon, and then even gave me a couple of recipes. And I tried one the other day of recipes for dandelions in olive oil and all of this, and the dandelion leaves, of course. And anyway, so, dandelion, they're wonderful. In this context, though clearly celebrative of their nomadic survival, the description of child farm workers as dandelions seems conflicted. Yet, in the 21st century, the dandelion representing strong, precarious existence has also spread. And I mentioned the book, Somewhere We Are Human, Authentic Voices on Migration, Survival, and New Beginnings. And they've got dandelions on the cover with a similar kind of thing. So, she also talks about the Maria Elena Lucas. I'm going to read this one, then we'll go on. She was speaking to the churches up in the Midwest, and church women especially, and she was getting a lot of good response. But then one day I was in a church meeting, and this woman came up and said, I want you to know there are Ku Klux Klan members in this community, and I've been told to tell you to lay off because they are going to pay you a visit. I said, what do you mean? She said, they're very upset with what you're doing. I didn't know what the Klan was, so I said, well, tell them if they want to pay me a visit, fine. I'd be glad to talk with them. I wasn't scared until afterwards when I found out about the Klan. I learned they belonged to one of the churches. So I go on and sort of imagine, what if they had met, and had tea, and because I think part of the issues here is about communication with everybody, and I think that is one of the strong things that we need to be thinking about now, with the amount of division we have. Lucas' narrative begs that we consider the implications of such unlikely circumstances. I say the fortitude of defense may depend on how normalized sense of propriety among Klan members that may or may not extend across the racist containment of the Klan ideology. Could a Chicana farm worker safely invite the KKK into her home for café, a pan dulce, and a chat? Would the KKK be caught off guard enough to question their own motives, as appeared to be happening among the church women in the agricultural growers' families? I go on and talk about that a little bit, but anyhow, so let me see. I think there's more of these poems. I think I'd rather talk about some of the issues that I've raised here, and so I'll just end with a little couple sentences from the afterword. I hope Environmental Justice Poetics emboldens readers to listen for and learn from these women and their expressive wisdom. I hope worldwide our progeny will retain the sense of awe at self and community expressions that mark each hue's distinctive glow of light and life, that generations of all genders will water Tulsi daily, that water will return to the springs and rivers and moisten seabeds for change. And so with that, questions, comments, yeah, I can. I don't know what time is it? How are we doing?
7:30.
7:30, okay, good, we have some time.
Morale is on the...
Oh, he is on, oh, great. Yeah, we have someone watching in India. So did the YouTube did never come up? Okay. Very good.
I guess the question that I have that we've been talking about for so long is how do you make the connection to people who live in the cities, right? Is how do you bring the issues of what goes on in the forests or in the farms or in agricultural areas to people who live in cities who have no idea about what's going on there. We're just so urbanized at this point. I mean, it's just a question that I have. So even the struggles that my friend here is having on the river, right, is how do people understand that what's going on there has some connection to us, and how do we resist it? I mean, how do we convince a lot of folks that this is actually connects all of us and affects all of us? And that is, I think it's just a question that I have all the time. Is how do we make that? How do we make those connections? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of interest in it, but it's got to be more. I guess it has to be much more interest, it seems to me. What do you think, Julie?
I think so. I mean, I think that's kind of been my struggle, right, of bringing more people of what, it's not a park for us, right? The language has to change.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so that's kind of like, I guess that's kind of like trying to educate people, but also changing the language of when we say, like, I'm going to use an example of, water is life, right, or sacred water. but what does that really mean?
Mhm.
You know? And what I've learned, you know, just being connected with water or, you know, doing pilgrimage or prayer is, you know, water is knowledge, you know, and that's really how our ancestors looked at, you know, these elements, right? It's a living entity, right? And we just don't see Mother Earth as a living entity anymore, or the waters or the trees. You know, it's more than just a resource, right? It's everything has spirit.
Mhm.
Everything it's living for a purpose, right? And and it has a purpose, right? But we just don't. There's just so much that we've been disconnected as a people. So so that's kind of been my struggle is when they're trying to defend Yanawana, it's just not because, you know, it's what it meant, right, for indigenous people, but it still has that meaning.
Right.
Right? And so Rebecca, for example, she didn't know what the meaning of that place was, right? Or the blue hole, or the connection, or and so forth. And I've had many elders who didn't even know that, you know? So, but for me, it's just, I think we need to start using, the language has to change to get more people connected, and also for the next generation, which is, you know, our kids, you know, so. That's just.
Until I'm realizing you probably don't know my neighbor and friend here, Alicia Ortega, and the reason that I'm thinking about that right now is that she grew up right down on Valdez Street near the park, near Breckenridge, and so had that child's connection to the park.
We used to go to the park where the trees were, right, with my dad and mom, Prairie Street, and Prairie Street. So, you know, she told me to take the tree. Oh my gosh, I have a picture of my dad when they were sitting right there by the tree.
Right.
That's the mic different.
Yeah. Oh, can I do this? I don't know if I can get it off of here. If we might be getting it better for people elsewhere to
Yeah,
take
maybe
it.
could you riff on that? Maybe that idea of knowledge or language changing. Oh no, it's my question for you. Is kind of to re-enunciate that. You know, if the women in the Chipko movement, you know, or those actions, how they speak compared to maybe how you hear people speak, not just in the farm labor movement, but in the city of San Antonio, or.
Well, I think one of the things that as I was rereading some of this and with my own struggle with the Garden of Good Trouble, as I call it, where they co-compliance and really co-compliance came after me and wanted everything cut and wanted, you know, and Rebecca was there, several of you have been there, and we're still struggling, but was exactly like you said, the language, the idea. I mean, we were fighting over the word of cultivation. What does it mean to cultivate? My relationship to that land was that, yeah, I was planting some things. I was planting native plants. I was planting some vegetables and some fruit trees, but I was also watching what is coming up from the seeds. And what came up was all these sunflowers and all this amaranth, and that started this whole interest in the amaranth in particular that we've learned a lot about, and that people had from their memories from the past too. And memories that go back further than anyone here on this continent, and also in India, actually, the amaranth is. So it's also an awareness. And when you come up against people coming in to take control of the, you know, to take away the field or to cut the trees or to dam the rivers, and that happens in the urban wild and the urban, you know, our neighborhoods as well. And also now with climate issues, I can hardly stand hearing lawnmowers, you know. I mean, it's not that they have no place or something. It's more like an emotional thing, because I know I mean, particularly the ones that aren't, like mine is electric or I have a push one, but all the gas and everything, and just doing it again and again, and what is this giving us, and so I think there's a lot of that stuff that we need to talk about. I mean, I don't expect people to change, and I know there's things I probably need to think about too, they're definitely in terms of how are we gonna cope with and do better with the environment in the next few years as the storms get worse and the droughts and everything that is, we're just really getting off kilter. And it becomes either this thing of people denying or it being so big that people, such a calamity that people, I think, shut down. They don't want to hear it even if they believe it. And that's, of course, in the city. And I think in a way, people who are farming or have a closer relationship to the earth and growing things and animals and this kind of thing, which can happen and does happen in smaller pockets in the city. But they are more aware. They see the differences on a day-to-day, season-to-season. We know what's going on, what was different from last year. And I think it's just more, and of course that's one of the reasons that when I was here volunteering and Jason was working on the programming for this year, this was in December, and I said, oh, well, I have a new book. And that's how this event came together, or got started, talking about it. But Ecocentro does, is doing that kind of thing. I don't know. Do you have any ideas, Jason, in terms of what you guys are working on and how that might connect some of these?
Yeah, they bring up a good point is, changing the language and bringing awareness and just dialogue. We're all social beings and communicating, educating people, inviting them into your space and making them understand or telling them why it's important to you and your relationship to it. I think it's very important for them to understand your perspective. And there's a disconnect, yes, with the urban and then people that are, a lot rural. But I think too, inviting people in to come out there, or vice versa. But in having places like this and other places and engagements and different activities is a way to bring the community together and speak to those different things and try to change the culture or the mindset, or because a lot of it is kind of ingrained in our culture, and in order to change it, we have to have that conversation and communicate. And that's what this place is. It's a forum for everybody to come to, the community, students. We're part of San Antonio College, but we want to invite people to talk about these issues that we're experiencing and then continue this conversation outside and with their neighbors. So I think that's important for me, and that's how I learned too. I might come into a space and not really understand it, and by asking questions or seeing other people doing what they're doing and how they interact or respect it brings more awareness for me to understand how their relationship is in. And so too, like you mentioned too, climate change and all the things, people in the urban city I noticed really started paying attention. They're like, well, food's becoming more expensive. They're being affected in different ways. Electricity's going up, water's becoming more scarce. We're in drought, there's more restrictions. So that's how they're seeing the connection. But obviously there's other people that see the connection, in a spiritual, more connected. There's a, like you were saying, you feel that, and some people don't, but they see it in a different way. And I guess they do know it, but they're disconnected from it, and they need help or guiding to that perspective. But it's important for all of us just to be here and talk about it, and that's kind of my take on it. So thank you for coming out here and starting the conversation. So if anyone else has anything to add to it, so.
So I just want I mean, unfortunately, we live in this horrible capitalist society, so, everything has an economic value, and so, what is the value of air and water and whatever for most people? We take it for granted, right? But when issues do occur, it always impacts those that are in the lower classes, and so we're the first to suffer and to have to deal with it. And so, like, here in San Antonio, we have, Rebecca and I see so many seniors that are living with a little fan, and getting dehydrated and whatever. And so, I'm from the historic West Side area, and so we do a lot of door-to-door outreach with our community. And I actually was able to meet up with a professor at UTSA, and within our door-to-door stuff, they want to study climate issues in our neighborhood because it impacts our health and so many other things, and so they purchased sensors, and so we're asking families to participate. And so then once we get all the study done, they will see, like, you live here in this neighborhood, there are not a lot of parks, there's not a lot of green space, it does impact you. And then we definitely would reach out to our city council and say, when we're doing policy about required parking spaces or whatever, let's change that, because look at how, these kids here have a lot of asthma issues or whatever, and it's all, and we'll have evidence. So, it's just unfortunate that we don't value the things that are most precious to us.
There was interesting, this made me think what you were talking, there was an interesting, complete contradiction of messages coming out during the last summer, where they were, on one hand, they were talking about, we need more green, leafy vegetation. I think that's what, was coming out from the environmental, ecological piece. And meanwhile, they were coming around our neighborhood and
down your tree.
Code compliance and chopping down trees and giving us tickets for, and at least their family, we're across the street from each other, and for years, her husband has my friend David has been the one that I've had for a while talking to the code compliance, because, guys can sometimes make, that crazy lady, she likes her plants. But this shouldn't be, this is, part of it is a place, and, if Ecocentro can be one of the places like that, and Esperanza is, and other places where, and our place, the market, and I'm going to introduce you in a minute, if anybody doesn't know already. But we need places where we can also come and say, hey, I see what you're doing here, and this relates to what I do, and this is, whether it's something that I've always done in my family, because some of the, in some ways we were better able to live through the heat in the previous, and houses were made differently. There was, the breezes coming through and all these things. And so in some ways we made it more dangerous for people, I think, who don't have, 365 days a year air conditioning. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to, I think most people here, do you know that, everyone here? Do people know?
Ella was the only one that she left.
Tell us about your place on the east side and our place in the market, and
yes, and Jamal.
And Jamal can maybe tell us.
My name is Linda Richardson, and I was born and raised on the east side. And my family is one generation off the farm in Seguin. It's really sweet home community where 300 free enslaved individuals started Sweet Home community out there, but you know, when all the farms started to deteriorate, a lot of the young men and the young women went in the military or something, and it had a profound effect on the community down there. But since my family was one generation off the farm, we were still brought to know how important the land was, how important it was to take care of our elders, to go down there in the summer to help them take care of things, and they would be in town during the winter to make sure that there was somebody at home to give home-cooked meals to the children as they got out of school, and it was a secure environment. What I wanted to say is that right next door to Martin Luther King School is called Our Place, and Our Place is my place of business. Before the pandemic, we have elderly and disabled there. And I did open it up because I found that the hardest hit people who are disabled or elderly were Black females. For this reason, they would have strokes and have heart attacks and still had to keep the children because of how racism worked. It was a lot of things that were not afforded to us. But almost everybody had some little garden that they had, or they would get things from the country, from Sweet Home. And I was just so amazed. I was a big girl and didn't know everybody doesn't cut up their chicken. You go to the store and they charge you $1 to cut up your chicken. You run all the way back home and say, Mama, should I give him $1 to cut the chicken? I said, wasn't that weird? And Mama said, oh, my poor dumb baby. We not only, we raised the chickens and we did all that. Now, I'm in school and I know all this. I never knew you could get peas out of a can. I didn't know you could get, I thought greens in a can would just totally kill you. But so, see, when some of them were down there and we had our great aunts and everybody, whenever they came to your house, they didn't bring you money, they didn't have you, but they would bring you vegetables. And then you would sit on the porch and shell them, and you would shuck the corn, and you would do all those things. But it kept you outside, and there were breezes. Everybody had a tree. Everybody had a tree, and everybody was so proud. Oh, my roses look better. My trees look like this. But now we always say, oh, it's just better to put cement down, and then you don't have to worry about it. Where I am now is I graduated from Our Lady of the Lake, and I'm a social worker, and I want to get back to, I noticed that I started off my career at St. Benedict's. It had a hospital, nursing home, and everything down there in the King William area. And I just couldn't understand why the Black women were so sick. They were towed up by the time they got into daycare. And so I worked there. I worked over across from the Chipko Movement. I worked, and then I saw the next group was my Hispanic females. Because, you know, but the thing is, they still had the attitude of having multiple families in the household, right? And all females are caregivers, and they take care of each other. All the men were taken care of, and all the women were still doing the caring. So when I moved back to the east side, and I opened up a little, it was a mom and pop store. So what I did is I made it into adult daycare. Adult daycare is really it's designed to keep the clients out of premature nursing home placement, and it's designed to keep the community together. But with the city giving you a hard time about having your house and raising taxes and not protecting them, letting people next door have pit bulldogs and Rottweilers, the elderly and the disabled would not go outside. So associations and social service agencies were necessary. And you say, well, there's social workers all out there. I don't ever see a social worker. Y'all, if you say you have a social worker, I challenge you. These are case managers, and they go through a checklist. They don't even ask you, what else will you need? Whatever, right? And so the valuable services that a person needs to maintain their houses till they transition, that valuable wisdom that these young people could benefit from, that this really works. It's not just on television. You can really feed yourself. And we've become a group of people who buy instead of produce. And we can do it. Now, in my adult daycare center, we had a garden. We had a garden. God, it almost broke me. The cost of watering our garden was tremendous. But we compromised on that because I did not know that the clients really, really thrived watering the garden. And we had little watermelons, we had tomatoes. Oh, those watermelons were so pitiful, they were so small. And everybody wanted a piece, you know? And what that does, it helps them to live longer too. Now, I closed the business and at the beginning of the pandemic, and that was really bad, but I was exhausted. I'm trying to get it back open, but I've noticed nobody is taking care of the very disabled. These people are so smart. They have so much experience. They can say it more passionately than us. Now, if you drive, you know where the Martin Luther King March goes down the street, you go over there now. I challenge you, within the next 2 weeks, go over there. They've knocked down all the trees. And you know those funny little houses that are 2-story now?
Yeah.
There is a whole barrage of them over there. Now, we cannot afford it. Poor people cannot afford it, but they will rent them for $1,400 a month. You cannot buy it till after so many years. I mean, it is designed to, pardon me?
No, just.
It's just designed, and you gotta stay vigilant. You gotta stay vigilant because they were trying to take our commercially zoned areas and make them residential, and this is what they did. Now, my challenge is I am 71. I'm 71, and I get tired faster. My heart is in it, but those knees just ain't working so well anymore. And what I'm saying is, there's so much out there. We got to focus on the things we can do and make the greatest impact. But you say, okay, but we still have this. That's why I believe coalitions are so important. You know, this person can work on this, or Kamala, she comes over to the marketplace. Well, the marketplace is a buy black. Every Saturday from 12 to 4, we get vendors to come in and try to make money and give out information about how we will still thrive, not just survive in our own community. And so,
And you also have programs, I mean, drumming and...
we bring the children in to drum. I did not know children could not read. I did. My son grew up at an African-centered school. We took no money from our white brothers and sisters. We worked. They had a garden. They had self-defense. We didn't have a janitor. The children cleaned up the place. They helped to feed each other, the little ones. They knew animal husbandry. They did all of those things. And what you say, babe?
We didn't know how to breed them. We didn't know how.
No, y'all did know how to take care of animals and what happened with them.
Husbandry means you breed them. And
well, excuse me.
He's a scholar.
I'm saying, like, we had like cattle in the backyard.
No, they didn't have that, but y'all went down to see the farms that in Molly Stevens Ranch to see how they were doing it. No, they didn't raise animals and chickens. Isn't he wonderful? He gonna correct his mother in public. I don't know who's gonna give him. Well, it's okay, baby. But they knew how to. They learned to horseback ride. No children from this school was gonna drown. We had huge issues of children drowning, and so everybody had to learn how to swim, and they had social skills. They knew how to respect an elder, how to do all these things. But the problem then was, in order to do all this without all this money, is we could only focus on a small group. You see what I'm saying? So I believe we have to develop more associations And we can't just talk about something once every so often, right? It has to be a program where this group is gonna have this kind of information. Like Mama O.J. Boomy, she comes and tells us about nutrition, how we can buy healthy food cheaper, right? And healthier and stuff like that. We have and if you want your children, or if you want to come over there and have free drumming, we have free African dance. We are teaching the children to read, and we're teaching the children to be out in the community and to give back. It's not just for you. And things that I didn't even know public school was doing. I really didn't. And don't leave Idea School out there either. What they're doing to children is sad. My niece is a teacher there, so I do know that. But I'm just saying, we're over here on the east side. We're in the 3400 block of Martin Luther King, and we're trying to go together and say, like, we're gonna help this block. Then we're gonna move on to another block and another one. Can I do the whole east side? No. Most of the people, Kamala thinks I know everybody on the east side, but I never traveled anywhere. I never moved anywhere. I was on the east side or the west side. That's where I was. And so I will still know more people than people who traveled and moved and what have you. But I think a lot of Sister Fabia Kuji-Jakalia, she said words are powerful. They mean a lot. You gotta make them give movement, as you were saying before. And it's when we say some things, we gotta make sure that we're saying it where we can get the impact that it needs. But we are on the east side over there, close to W.W. White Road, is one of the worst HEBs, the most fattening food at the highest prices. And I love my health department, but they are not being vigilant on what is being served, sold to our people either. And it costs so much. But fast food, now I like Mexican food, but it ain't no reason why a whole block on W.W. White Road, you have all of these fattening foods. So what we do is tell people, you eat that and you're supporting a small business, but ask for the food this way, ask for it that way. So we don't become, it'd be an argument between two groups that are trying to work together. Now there is a concentrated effort to pit our Hispanic community with the black community, and I'm talking about the Haitians too and what have you. They're dumping them over there, not giving them jobs, not giving them opportunities. And so people, maybe a Mexican family has bought a house and right next door, they're just leaving these people here and not giving them jobs, and they sit around all day and they're disruptive. So now this lady is fussing with this lady, and it's not about race. It's about what's being done to pit us against each other. But I want to say again, I was so disturbed to see all of those areas set up to build. I think it's 10 houses back to back, right there on Martin Luther King Street, up by before you go under the underpass, and they're just everywhere. You say, well, what happened to the people who own these houses? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. He just says there's some questions online. So.
Oh God, is this somebody?
But we've got to get water collection.
Okay, I want to say this is my son Jamal Montemayor, and he's a student at UTSA. And his best, you can tell what your major is.
I'm majoring in anthropology. My name is Jamal Montemayor. Like I said, I'm a student at UTSA. I'm studying anthropology. I'm studying traditional healers here in San Antonio called curanderos, particularly those that are practitioners of the Afro-Cuban religion of Santeria. I'm working on writing my master's thesis at the moment. Yes, I know Kamala through the By Blacks, that the fairs that my mother throws at our place. Yes. And
So maybe you all can talk afterwards and I think you said, yeah, Greg, take the, and we've got,
I'll just share the few comments from online. I'll catch you up and see what you maybe want to respond to. But Alicia Garlock writes that allowing the developers to remove so many trees is heating our city up. The easiest way to make a small difference in our heat island is vegetation. Not small little trees, but trees like the ones they want to cut down in Brackenridge, save Brackenridge Park. Nadine Salaba says, as you talked about the Chipko or hugging movement in India, I couldn't help but think of the iconic picture of an old Palestinian woman and her arms wrapped around a partially destroyed olive tree in a desperate attempt to protect it when an Israeli military vehicle in the background. And those are the 2 comments and one more just asking if they could. So I don't know if you want to respond to.
okay, I just want to say, oh, is this, oh, I'll go back to this one.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. In terms of Nadine's visualization, I just came across my background is Mennonite partly, and the Mennonite men, and there's this Mennonite action group that's doing hymn sings and getting arrested for calling for a ceasefire. But they are also going to be replanting or planting olive trees in a few months, I think it is, and maybe it's next year already. But you can donate to this, and they're going to be trying to replant some of the trees that people have lost that have been cut, because those olive trees are really basic to the rebuilding of Palestine after all of what's gone on, so anyway, they're doing that, and I was just really happy to see that. I can pass that information on, and I think, just networking like what you're talking about, and Alicia and
someone
Matilde.
asked for your information specifically. They're like, I want to get in touch and find out about the good place. Very good. So, building networks and coalitions.
And Matilda and Alicia are both mentioned in the afterword, so y'all have to read the afterword. And their good work, and any other things that, I know it's about time to wrap up here, but any other comments or questions or responses to, and I'm really happy that these folks are here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for
Thank you so much.
coming.
Thank you, Kamala, for coming and presenting and sharing your new book out. As part of EcoCentral, if you've never been here, we're a community and student resource center for sustainability. So we invite people from all walks of life, from organizations, different backgrounds, to come here and to present and to teach the public about what's going on. But also we do have our own programs, and a lot of it's all tied, and there's a lot of parallels with like environmental poetics and environmental work that we're doing here as well, because we teach people about soil, we teach people about water conservation, urban planting, urban farming, native landscape design. So a lot of the stuff that we've all been kind of talking about and all those connections, all those things bring us here to the center, which is a great place to be. I'm grateful for being here, but also just having access to everybody in the community to be here is really great. And that's how we all learn and go forward. So,
and don't you do rainwater collection?
We do rainwater collection as well. So, yes. And we do have the Garcia Street Farm. We don't own it. Opportunity Homes owns it, but we've been managing it for several years. And the whole point of Garcia Street Farm is to provide food to the local community, and also some of it comes back to.
And that's on the east side, right?
Yes, that's
so
on
how do you?
I know that's where we need
you
to
guys have
connect
to talk afterwards.
Yeah, on Garcia Street, right down the street off Commerce and Garcia, and real close to St. Philip's College and the railroad track right there.
Oh, right.
Okay,
there.
so,
It's on the way. I saw it once coming from another side.
And it's a really good place for the community to come together. We have, talking about trees, we're doing a community, we're planting trees, 50 trees. We've got a grant to plant trees in that space. So we have 4 acres, and it needs trees desperately, but it's supposed to be a space for the community to come. And the tree event, we're planting 50 trees, so we need volunteers. So if you're interested, you're welcome to come out. But it's also a learning event to how to plant trees properly and to take care of them, because a lot of the things we've been seeing, you know, with these tree giveaways are really great, but we're lacking the education, and so we're wasting resources because, you know, we're watering and transporting them and all the things that are going into them. But we want to try to change that, and so this event, you know, it's part of that too as well. So creating a new, better space at the farm, and we have a lot of events there and here as well. So I invite you guys to come here, check our Eventbrite. We'll probably have you coming out again, I'm sure, maybe with a different topic. And if you guys know are part of an organization and want to come and present here as well, feel free to reach out to me. I'm the Conservation Events Coordinator, and we'd love to, you know, talk more. And we invite you to come out here. We're open to the public from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, to like tour the gardens and area. It's a community space for you guys. So thank you for being here. Thanks for Kamala, so we greatly appreciate it. So,
And there's some paper copies of this list, and we didn't go through very many of these, but these are links to both organizations and individuals that are doing this kind of work. You can take the paper copy. There's a few of those, and I can also send it to you. Or take a picture of this.
Yeah.
But I can also email it, and then you can have the live links. But
yeah, thank you.
There's lots more that we
as well,
keep talking about.
For recording everything.
Thank you, everybody.
I don't want to see South Texas militarized. I don't want to see people under surveillance.
The school right now is how do you meet the learning needs of the students without everyone having the same access. And right now everybody doesn't have the same access.
Growing our own, like in our own spaces again, and that this is like a revamp of these traditional kind of like methods.
This has been a rookery, one of very few, possibly only 2 rookeries in the city of San Antonio.
Like I felt when I was touching the stratosphere last year, that this is our one planet, and this is what we've got.